Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new episode of Project LS400, episode 39. So it's been a while since you've seen an episode on this project, and the reason is that I haven't done much work on the car and I had some health issues, so I couldn't do much work. But anyway, let me give you an update. As you can see, the car is currently outside and I've cleaned it. It was extremely dirty from sitting in the farmhouse, and truth be told, I started filming this episode a week ago, but along the way I got a little bit confused and the video got a little bit cluttered, so I decided to start where I should have started in the first place, to make this an understandable video. But anyway, let me first give you an update on the car, on the things that I have done to the car in the period in between episodes. In the previous episode you saw me tackle the largest and most expensive hurdle of this project so far, namely replacing the cracked windscreen. I have a new windscreen installed and I'm happy to report that everything seems to be perfectly fine. The car's been outside in the rain for a couple of days. I've washed the car, I've driven the car on a highway in rain. Everything is watertight, and also the car seems to be even more quiet during highway driving than it was, and that makes sense because the old windscreen was entirely loose on the top end. Speaking of the top end, the trim piece still isn't installed, and the reason for that is, well, I've been looking for the trim piece. I found a universal trim piece, but the company that says that has it in store doesn't reply to my emails or phone calls, so that seems to be no option. Then I went to my friend's house to compare the windscreens and trim pieces of a second gen with a first gen, because he has a collection of those cars, and I figured out that the trim piece of a second gen LS would also fit a first gen LS. So I ordered a new one from Amayama Trading, and I waited for it for 3 weeks, and then I got a message, oh, it's out of stock, we can't supply it anymore, and here's your refund. And I had to plan to start working and filming again when I had it in store, but in the meantime we're 6 weeks ahead and I still don't have a trim piece. I have one option left, or probably there are more options, and that's taking one from a car that's on a scrapyard. I've contacted a Lexus specialist on the other side of the country. It's a 4-hour drive from here, and the guy has a couple of second gen LSs for scraps and for parts, and I asked if he could if he had a trim piece left on one of those cars. But we're 2 weeks later, still haven't heard anything from the guy, so that hope seems to vanish a little bit. But anyway, that's the update on the windscreen and the trim piece. There's one other thing that I've done to the car. I reinstalled the driver's seat. I repaired the adjuster for the reclining function, so the seat back, that's working perfectly fine. Super happy with that. And I also have the interior installed, so the front section of the headliner, the pillar trim and such, but that's something that I showed in previous videos, so I did not record that. So now onto the subject of this episode of Project LS400. This is the key to my LS400, and on the side here is a little button for the door lock unlock function, and when I push it, nothing happens. It's something that I have looked into in the past, but I haven't been able to figure it out, and it didn't bother me all too much, but I think it would make for an interesting episode. And also I've got some fewer questions on this subject. Now you have to know, over here in the Netherlands it's mandatory by insurance companies to have an extra secure alarm system fitted, but this is a car from Belgium, and I'm not sure how things were over there 31 years ago, but I do know for a fact that this car has had an immobilizer. There was a tag reader under the ignition lock inside the car. They punched a hole in there. It was also removed from the car, and when I looked into the wiring I could see some wires of the starter were cut and then later on repaired. Anyway, I've been looking for traces of an alarm system and I haven't been able to find anything. My previous LS400, that I had before, was originally a Dutch car, and it had an alarm system fitted by a Dutch company, and that was very neatly done, very neatly wired into the original wiring looms of the car, and that worked just perfectly fine. But a lot of wiring in this car has been botched. The majority of it I have been able to repair, and as said, when I looked for damages or cut-ins and wiring-ins on the wiring loom of this car. When it comes to the door lock system, I haven't been able to find anything. But anyway, we're going to look into that, and as said, I started filming already, but during the process I learned how this works, and to have a good understanding on how to diagnose it and how it works, I first want to explain how this actually works. The door locks and all the switches and input signals are controlled and monitored by the door lock ECU, which also acts as the anti-theft ECU, and that is located in the driver's footwell against the firewall. The remote control signals are picked up by the wireless remote ECU that's located in trunk, and it sits in front of the antenna. The door lock ECU also controls the interior light, so that's the light delay, the flashing LED on the instrument panel, and it sounds the buzzer that's located behind the left front wheel, and that has a buzzer volume control, which is a unique feature of the LS400, so that you can set the volume of the beeps that the car makes when you unlock the doors with your key remote control. And this is the communication between the door lock ECU and the wireless remote ECU. They share information back and forth, so they really communicate with each other. The antenna for the wireless door remote is integrated in the rear window in the upper lines, and the antenna cable runs via the C-pillar to the ECU in the trunk. What the door lock ECU basically does is control the lock state of the car. It's either locked or unlocked, and it bases its information on the lock position switches in the door locks themselves. So each door has a lock position switch, and it also monitors the door courtesy switches to know whether or not a door is opened or fully closed. Both front doors have a couple of extra switches. They have the key lock switch, which tells which direction the key lock is turned, so to the lock side or to the unlock side. And the driver's door has a couple of extras, the handle switch and the lock illumination. It means if the door is locked and you pull the door handle, the illumination in the lock cylinder is illuminated and the interior lights go on. There are 3 additional switches in the interior. First, there is the key in ignition switch. When there is a key in the ignition, the door lock ECU knows this, and it will ignore the signals coming from the wireless remote ECU in the trunk. So imagine there is a key in the ignition and the second key is outside the car. If someone would push the button on the key outside the car, it will not lock or unlock the doors. Then there is the main lock switch that's located on the driver's door in front of the buttons for the electric windows. This button can also be used to lock or unlock the doors. And finally, there's the most important switch, and that's the remote main switch, which sits on the dashboard in front of the driver's left knee, and that can switch the entire remote control system on or off. As said, the door lock system basically revolves around the lock state of the car, which is locked or unlocked. This is monitored and controlled by the door lock ECU. So what we see here is a signal coming from the lock cylinder, the driver's door, and then you can rotate it and the signal is sent to the door lock ECU. And of course the signal can come from the lock switch on the driver's door or the ECU in the trunk. The door lock ECU then compares all the input signals, so are all doors closed, are all door lock switches in the same position, and then it sends a signal to the door lock to go to the desired position, or locked or unlocked, and it shares this information with the wireless remote ECU in the trunk. And this is the information that is shared with the remote ECU in the trunk, the position of the door lock switches, so the position of the door locks themselves, and the door switches, so what Lexus calls the courtesy switches. That information is shared, and also whether or not the key is in the ignition. If there is a key in the ignition, all signals coming in from the remote ECU are ignored by the door lock ECU. The wireless remote is basically a very simple thing. It's the one key on the button, and what the wireless remote ECU does, it looks at the lock state of the car. So imagine that the car is locked and the driver pushes the button. It's going to assume that the driver wants to unlock the car. So it unlocks the car and it sends a signal to the buzzer to give a beep beep to tell the driver that the car is being unlocked. And if the driver pushes it again, it does the opposite. It knows all doors are unlocked and the driver pushes the button and then it's going to lock the car. Now, in order to diagnose this problem, we have to look at all those input signals and the communication between the ECUs and all the output signals coming from the door lock ECU. And to make matters a bit more complex, there is also a feedback loop that we have to look at. So if the ECU sends a signal to lock the doors, it's also going to look at the lock switches whether or not they really did change position, because if one doesn't play nice, it will also stop working. Now to diagnose it, we have to look at the lock triggers. So the door lock ECU has two lock triggers, which are two lines with a constant 12 volt. And they run along the lock switches. The first one is the main lock switch in the driver's door. The second one is the driver's door key lock cylinder. That's also in the passenger's door. And there is the wireless remote ECU. They get all of these switches get a 12 volt supply, and if one line is pulled to ground, then it will change the lock state of the car. Here the driver pushes the main switch to lock, and that line is pulled to ground. The door lock ECU signals that, and it sends a lock command to all door locks, and there is a feedback loop, so all lock switches communicate back to the door lock ECU, so it can check whether or not all 4 door locks are actually working and if all 4 doors are actually locked. And once all the door locks are in the same position, the door lock ECU relays it back to the wireless remote in the trunk. And if the key outside the car is pushed to remote control, the remote ECU in the trunk will just switch the lock states. It only toggles back and forth between the current lock state and the lock state that is the opposite. Okay folks, so now you know a little bit more about the inner workings of the door lock ECU and the wireless remote ECU. We're gonna diagnose it with this knowledge, and for that we're gonna use the basic procedure from the workshop manual, but we're gonna use it loosely. The workshop manual calls for the use of a multimeter, and you can do that if you have a multimeter at home. You're gonna check all the signals. So the workshop manual says from close the driver's door, and then you should have a voltage reading on pin, let me look it up, that's on pin 10. You expect a 12 volt signal with the driver's door fully closed. With that you can test two things. One is basically multitude of things. You can test the working of the door switch itself, so that's the door courtesy switch. You can also check the door lock ECU, because when the door is closed, it should send a 12 volt constant to pin 10 on the connector in the trunk. But if you use a multimeter, you can also check the resistance in the wire, and if you get 0 volt when the door is open, well, that's what you expect, and when you close the door and you get, say, 6 or 7 volt, that tells you that something is wrong with the wiring. Now, in all honesty, I already performed the test, but to visualize this, I built this little breadboard contraption with 10 LEDs. These are in the order of the pin on the connector, and well, you have the green LEDs, and those are the signals coming from the door lock ECU. So you have one for the key is out of the ignition, and the door switches all when the doors are all closed. There is also a yellow LED, and that's the buzzer, the alarm buzzer, that either says beep or beep beep when you open or close the door. And the two blue LEDs are the lock and unlock signal from the ECU. So these are the yellow and the blue ones are signals coming from the wireless remote ECU going to the front of the car, and the two red ones are for battery positive and ground. So I already connected some wires to the ECU itself. So this is the ECU itself. I took it out of its housing because it's easier to test this way, and I connected this, and my plan is first to check the signals coming from the door lock ECU, and then I want to plug them in, so this acts as a breakout board, so I can see which signal is coming from the front, and then it is looped into the ECU itself. And with this I can also check the outgoing signals coming from this. I'm not sure if I already showed it, but this little board over here, let me pull it out, is the decoder that is matched to the keys. So in short, if one of these signals, these clearance signals, so the green LEDs, is missing, this will not respond. So we can miss either one of the signals coming from the door lock ECU, but also my key and this ROM also could be non-matching. I don't expect that to be the case, because I have to think that these should be unmatched or that the keys are changed somewhere in time. Yeah, and the worst case scenario is that this circuit board is broken. So then I have to delve further into that, and what you can see probably on the ads over here is my benchtop multimeter and my oscilloscope. With that I can also mimic the signals coming in, and then we should expect a response from the ECU, and that's the best way to find out if this ECU in itself is broken. Anyway, let's head out to the car and connect this. Okay, everything is connected in the trunk, and as you can see, it's already coming alive. It does some odd things which I'll explain in a second, but over here you can see the connector, and we have battery plus, the first red LED via this connector, and also battery ground via that connector. At this moment the key is out of the ignition, the car is locked, but I left the driver's door open. So first I want to test the main remote system on off switch, so that's the one to the left of the steering wheel. I'll blink a picture in screen. So reach through the open window, put the switch off and back on. I couldn't see it, but you probably could. So those red LEDs went out and back on again, so you know that the main switch is working correctly. Now I'm gonna just open the door with the key and put the key in the ignition and put the ignition to the accessory setting. So first unlock the car, open the door, so that's one LED less, that's the last one because one door is opened. Put the key in the ignition and put it to the accessory setting. Door closed, and that last green LED is on. So yeah, now things stop flashing, these LEDs are off, and that is because that the door switches are all set to unlock. So this makes complete sense. Don't know what to think about the flashing. Now these are the unlock and lock circuit, and when they get a constant 12 volt plus from the door lock ECU, and to lock or unlock the system you can pull this to ground. So I have this little red jumper cable to the negative, so to battery ground, body ground, and when I click it, it immediately responds. Now you can see that the door went, maybe you could hear it click, but these are the door locks for the passenger and the rear doors, and this one is still, sorry, that's the key switch. This one, the last one, is the lock switch for the driver door, and that's because there is a little issue with that electric motor in the door lock. But when I toggle the switch to lock, you can see now it's on. Now this tells us a couple of things, that all the signals coming from the door lock ECU do reach the trunk, and currently they're okay. I cannot explain the flashing, don't know why that is, but when something is pulled to ground in either the unlock or lock circuit, the system immediately responds. So the feedback towards the door lock ECU is okay. Everything works. I'm gonna unlock the car again and listen. See, now everything is unlocked, the car responds. So all of that is working perfectly fine. I just cannot explain the flashing, don't know why it is, and it's also not explained in the workshop manual. That's only the case when the key is out of the ignition, so the car is basically switched off. I have to look into that, not sure if it's normal or not, but anyway, now we know that the wiring and the majority of the signals reaching the trunk are okay. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. I got a little bit confused. I wanted to trick the signal to the key switch into the ECU, but that didn't work at all. Anyway, what we did figure out that all the signals that should be there are there, and the signals are converted in a correct way by the door lock ECU, but it's still unclear why these LEDs are flashing as soon as the ignition is switched off. We get a constant 12 volt battery plus where we expected, but when I switch the doors to the lock position, so now the ignition is off. Yeah, now they work alright, but why these are flashing is still unclear to me. They did it without the ECU in the loop, and they do it or with or without the ECU in the loop, I would say. So yeah, I have some head scratching to do. Well, it's kind of frustrating that I haven't been able to solve this. I really wanted to make a video on how to diagnose and how to repair this issue with a non-working remote control, but yeah, I've run into my own limitations, and that is what it is. But hopefully you found some useful information in this video. Not only make this video to provide help and give advice, but also, yes, every now and then, or oftentimes, I need help myself too. So I think this will be a two-part episode, hopefully not a three-part episode. But I'm gonna park it right here. If any of you has any hints or tips or tricks, please let me know. I'll leave my contact information in the description box of the video. And yeah, I really hope you found something useful in here. As I said at the beginning, I started recording this episode twice over, and I really want to put this video out, so I'm gonna leave it here. It already cost me a couple of weeks to film this episode because I have another project over here that I really want to film. But anyway, it is what it is. I hope you liked following me along, and if you did, please let me know by giving me a like, leave a comment in the description box, and if you want to help support the channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. I will always leave the link in the description box of this video. Anyway, I'm gonna start a new project anytime soon. I will make a video of that. Hopefully you find it interesting, and for now I would like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one of Project LS400, the new project or a real life car review. Thanks and bye.